Starting in 1966, he helped change the look of rock and roll fashion, selling his designs to Keith Richards, Bob Dylan, Rod Stewart, Jack Nicholson, David Bowie, The Clash, Madness, George Michael, Iggy Pop, The Stray Cats, Tom Waits, Fun-Loving Criminals, Johnny Marr, Oasis and The Pretenders. Designs from his label that appeared on record sleeves by Rod Stewart, Madness, in promo videos for George Michael, films by Jim Jarmusch, and stage costumes for David Bowie. The Face said he's one of the crucial figures in the development of British style. He says, "My designs were just rock and roll, a stage wear for the street." Who is he? Well, we're going to find out in this episode of the Bureau of Lost Culture. I'm Stephen Coates. Welcome. Still trying to understand what counterculture was, or is. Listening to stories, digging deep, looking down the back of 60s sofas and under 70s scatter cushions, and in all sorts of other places. Have you got any idea? Come and help us. bureauoflostculture.com. You can sign up for our newsletter. And thanks to Adrian, Esmeralda, Rachel, Jake, and all the Soho Radio crew for all that they do. It's amazing. Now, back to it. Counterculture, youth culture, street and pop culture all intersect around music, books, and of course, clothes. I'm a little bit worried about my look, given that I'm sitting with one of the most stylish men in London. The man behind Cockle and Johnson. Johnson and Johnson. Johnson's the modern outfitter, and the Rocka, with his outlets in Kensington Market, King's Road, Covent Garden, Portobello Road, from the 60s to the noughties. Welcome. Lloyd Johnson. Hello, Lloyd.
Not sure about all that. Hello.
How's it going? All right.
Yeah, fine.
Welcome to the Bureau of Lost Culture.
Thank you.
You know what, Lloyd? In that long list of your clients or people who've worn your clothes, I did come across one particular name which blew me away, and that is Fred Astaire.
I'll tell you the story there if you want it.
Let's start with that. Right.
It was about 1971. Mr. Freedom, Paradise Garage, and all those guys, Trevor Miles and Tommy Roberts, were flying high. I also was doing pop art prints for my shirts and jackets and things like that. One of the prints I did, which is now in the Victoria and Albert Museum collection, was a print of Fred Astaire from the film Top Hat. One day in the market, this woman came in, introduced herself as Fred Astaire's daughter, and she lived in South Ken. And she said to me, "I'm not sure whether my father would be too happy about having his image splashed all over shirts and jackets." I immediately saw, oh God, this is the end of me in business. You know? So I said to her, "Would you like a coffee? Come and have a coffee and we'll have a talk." And we had a chat, and I said to her, "What you see is what there is. You know, I've just got this small area in Kensington Market on the first floor. I'm a big fan of Fred Astaire. I watch the films every Sunday afternoon and basically love him, you know." We'd spent maybe an hour and a half talking, and she could see I was genuine. She said, "Oh, I'll phone him tonight and I'll pop in tomorrow." And she came in the next day and she said, "He said it's fine, but you've got to make him a jacket and a silk scarf, hand-rolled." So
you've been feeling a bit tense overnight, right? Expecting this visit.
Well, no, I don't panic. I try to stay calm all the time. And anyway, I said to her, "Yeah, that's fine, no problem." And then I cheekily said, "As long as you get him to send me a photograph of him wearing it." Because I knew nobody would ever believe me in a million years, you know. She phoned him again and came in the next day and said, "Yeah, that's fine. He'll send you a photograph, but you mustn't use it for any commercial gain at all." The same thing happened with Jerry Lee Lewis, you know, years later. And I fully understand all that sort of thing, but I mean, it's just for my own personal
Memories, right?
Memories, and for me to believe it happened.
Right.
Because like when you're living a day-to-day life, all these people come in and buy clothes, and some of them you don't know who the hell they are, you know, and then the next thing you know, they're megastars, you know, and I mean, I think that's the best way, you know, because like they know they can come to your shop and they can talk to you, and they're not going to get treated any way differently than they've always been treated, you know.
Yeah, well, I can't actually match that story, obviously, but I have co-written a song with Cole Porter.
That's brilliant.
I'll tell you why, it's just reminding me, because so I wrote this song quite a few years ago, and it was called I Don't Get My Kicks Out of You, right? And it was a sort of flipping I Get My Kicks Out of You, right? And my music publishers in America, they got paranoid. It doesn't sound like a Cole Porter tune. It's just that it's taking the same idea and flipping it around, right? They said, well, we've got to check in with his publishers. So we ended up giving half the publishing rights to Cole Porter's estate, which, considering I'm not very well known, they couldn't have made any money out of. But I get to say I've co-written a song with Cole Porter, which I'm happy about.
That's normally the way, isn't it? It's the middlemen in between them.
But listen, we've already dived in, and let's back up the truck a bit, and I want to go right back to the start.
I was born in Enfield. My family's from Hoxton, and they lived in, funny enough, Haberdasher Street,
right,
just behind Hoxton's Square, where Drake's Outfitters is now. Just before their flat, the whole area was flattened, and then it skipped their Victorian block of flats, hit the next Victorian block of flats, which are now fake Regency houses.
This is a German bomb.
Well, it was a whole load of bombs. And my gran and granddad, they moved to North London, and my mother got married. I had my sister and me in Enfield, I think it was called Merry Hills Drive or something like that.
So that was at a time when, well, particularly after that sort of devastation, but people were quite keen to move out of inner London, weren't they, into more kind of leafy suburbs.
They used to get a lot of stick being called bomb dodgers, you know, as if it's like, something terrible to move
something
out.
Slightly shameful to move out of the way of the bombs.
Yeah. You know, I think that's
being unpatriotic.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? You know, stay there and get blown up. Yeah, right. You know. And my granddad was foreman on the GPO, doing all the bomb damage, and basically he got a lot of chest problems because of gas leaks, and when they were underground doing stuff and all the rest of it. They moved to Hastings because being EastEnders, basically that's where they used to go for their summer holidays, you know. Yeah,
and again, for anybody who doesn't know the UK or London, it's like Hastings is a sort of seaside town on the south coast.
Yeah, working class.
Very working class,
Victorian seaside resort. You know, with Punch and Judy, Biddy the Tub Man. It was a bit like Brighton Rock, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Fallen away from its sort of Victorian splendour a bit, wasn't it?
It started losing its way when London had huge problems with homelessness and drug-related problems with people. And it was cheaper for them to, you know, the hotels were empty because of people going abroad. During the 70s, they started placing people that were down on their luck. So,
people with social issues, and in fact, actually, Hastings maybe it still is, but it became associated, didn't it, with quite a lot of heroin users. But when you were a kid, it wasn't like that, right?
We were. I mean, I was a sort of mod, I suppose.
I suppose there is a theme running through this as well, because there's always been that link between mods and these seaside places like Brighton and Hove and Margate and Ramsgate and Hastings, right?
Lloyd Johnson witnessed the mounted invasion of his hometown of Hastings.
And I'll never forget the view of a V formation, load of scooters coming down the road, with all the sun hitting the chrome. And I just thought, there's something about this that reminds me of medieval knights on chargers. And I just felt, we're taking over the world. You know, we're taking over the world.
If you could pass a new law, Colin, one new law, what would it be?
Ban all the scooters off the road.
The rockers are another teenage category. They deride the mod's dress display, but They peacock in their own way just as frantically. Metal studs in leather jackets, the leather wear itself, the jackboots, these are just as much a proclamation of group identity.
As to you, why do you go around with mods?
Well, I prefer them.
You what?
I prefer them. I wouldn't like to be seen round with one of those scruffy lads.
Do you like them because they dress properly and all this sort of thing? Do you like being a mod?
Yeah, it's the greatest, isn't it? It's the best, isn't it?
And do you like getting involved in punch-ups?
Well, I don't like getting involved, but you can't seem to help it.
And the rockers go for less sophisticated surroundings. They prefer motorcycles to motor scooters. Their chief instrument is noise in their music and their
When
machine.
I was about 13, 14, there was a youth club open up there. My mother said to me, you should go to this youth club, you know. Thought I was sort of too insular and isolated, you know. And a lot of my schoolmates went, and I got interested in guitar music and stuff like the Shadows, the Ventures, Dwayne Eddy, Link Ray and all that type of thing that they were playing there. Obviously Buddy Holly and things, and Dion and God knows what. 2 or 3 guys there that didn't have Elvis haircuts. And I had a college boy.
College boy's a haircut, is it?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, with a parting, side parting,
right.
and a raised parting like that. It's sort of affiliated to modern jazz players, I suppose, like Perry Como as well, you know, that type of thing. There was a guy called Pete Gasson there who had this amazing suit. It was like an Italian bum freezer suit with a half belt at the back, cloth-covered buttons and tight trousers with a little 1-inch slit up the side seam with a couple of buttons on top of the slit.
So you picked up all that? It was like you saw this was like the first time you'd seen a suit like that?
Yeah.
With that kind of detailing?
Yeah. And then my sister was getting married and my mum said, oh, you need a suit, because my mum was divorced and I had to give my sister away. I was probably 15 or something. And that would have been 59, 60. I went to... it was either Hepworth's or Burton's, which are tailors, and got a pinstripe suit. And she said, you can't have a pinstripe suit. That's a business suit. I said, no, I want a pinstripe suit. And with the pinstripe suit, I wore a Van Heusen stiff white collar, which was a cutaway collar, spread collar, with a black knitted tie, and a blue and dark stripe shirt. She said, what are you going to wear on your feet? And I had a friend called Dave Murrell who had just recently done a photo shoot, and he was wearing Levi 501s and a pair of Anello David boots, which I saw him often and lusted after those boots. So I said to my mum, I want a pair of Anello and David boots. So that was one of my first trips to Soho, Anello and David's in Charing Cross Road. That was it. I was set. You know, I was obsessed with clothes. You know, so I had to have. You know, I only went to work so I could buy another suit.
We've got to pause there a bit because your whole life has been about clothes.
Yeah, very shallow, isn't it?
No, not at all. Have you got any insight into like why it was so important?
I think it's because my grandfather was always showing me how to clean my shoes, right? You know, there was always that thing of having clean underpants on in case you get knocked down in the street. I was brought up mainly by my grandmother and my grandfather. So
and he was a stylish man, was he?
Most men were then. They all wore suits. Even Irish navvies wore suits to dig the roads, you know. I think the whole wearing a suit thing was amplified by people after the war coming out of the services and getting a free
D-mob suit.
D-mob suit, yeah. And so that was passed on to the children, you know, that sort of attitude of, you know, you've got to be clean shaven and sure you have wash behind your ears sort of thing, all that. So it was, you were brought up like that, you know.
You'd done your first trip to London and then quite quickly you started getting clothes for other people or buying things for other people, didn't you?
Yeah, well, in Hastings during the summer, you got a lot of French language students coming over for a month or two to learn English, and you had Persian boys. The Persian boys had a lot of money because they were from very well-to-do families. One of the Persian boys, Mahmood, who looked very much like Paul Anka, he wanted he'd seen Brian Jones on Ready, Steady, Go or something like that, or Thank Your Lucky Stars, one of those. And he had a Matlow T-shirt, but it was like a sort of air taxi one, you know, with a 2-inch block stripe across it. He said he wanted one of those. And he gave me some money to get that. And on top of that, he gave me some money to get something for myself. And so it started that all the others were then, can you get me this? Can you get me that? You know? And so I was getting a little extra income, you know, from... I suppose the tips I was getting from them.
Commission,
know?
Right?
Yeah.
Enterprising order. So already, Lloyd, you'd started dealing clothes, but what about when you started making them? How did that start?
I moved to Sweden after the Mods and Rocka, so-called Mods and Rocka riots, because...
and again, for anybody who doesn't know about this was a sort of period in the early 60s.
It's 64.
Yeah, where this kind of whole youth culture, kind of tribal thing, as you said...
started clashing.
Yeah, and it was kind of blown up by the media, wasn't it? So you get these sort of pitched battles on these coastal towns between people who are into rock music or rock and roll, I guess, and mods, right?
Yeah.
And it turned into quite a sort of thing, didn't it, for a while?
Well, it sold newspapers,
right.
And the more they sold, the more they exaggerated.
Right,
it,
of course.
Basically.
Yeah. So you decided to get out of it all. And
my girlfriend's mum said, "What are you going to do with your life?" And you didn't think like that then, you know. It was like all Beatlemania and the Stones, and like, you know, you only live for the day.
You're young, right?
Yeah,
You're never going to get old.
You don't think about tomorrow, you know. And so I said, "Oh, I don't know." She said, "Well, I've just seen this advert for a salesman to this shop in London." So I looked at it, and it was Cecil G's, and I couldn't believe it, you know.
So Cecil G, again, for anybody who doesn't know, was a sort of important...
Very important.
Tailors,
he bought
outfitter,
loads of American clothes over, Italian clothes, all in the 50s, you know. So I wrote off and asked for an interview, and I got an interview, got the job, and moved to London.
You must have been in heaven then to get a...
Yeah, well, it was 1966. So my first day, I've come up to the West End feeling very frightened. I was aware I could in a bit of a wild place, you know. And so my first week was spent in the Shaftesbury Avenue store, and the likes of Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack and all those sort of people, and English people like Max Bygraves and Kenny Lynch and all that, all shop there. And they put me on the mezzanine floor where the knitwear was, and I'm going through all this fabulous Italian knitwear, you know, and all the told that I have to take them out of the cellophane bags, undo them so I understand the style, look at the style number, look at the price, fold them up, put them back exactly where they are, take note of what pigeonhole they're in, you know, so I know so I'm laboriously going through all this stuff. And then the guy I'm working under said, "Right, I'm going to lunch. There's a button here. If you get into trouble, push this bell." So I'm carrying on what I'm doing. And then all of a sudden I hear behind me. And I turn round, and it's Johnny Walker from the Walker Brothers. And he's got a walking stick, because he's done something to his leg, and a great big crew neck chunky jumper on. I say, "Oh, can I help you, sir?" You know, my voice just went, you know, because to me, those people were either on the television or cardboard cutouts in the record shop window, you know. And he was looking at me laughing, and I pressed the button, and I said, "It's my first day." He said, it's all right, don't worry." So the guy from downstairs come up and served him, and he said to me, "I think you'd better work on the lift today." Right? And I think, oh no, I'm going to get the bloody sack. It's my first day, you know, and I've got rent to pay and all this stuff. So I went down and stood by the lift. And then this man came in with a camel coat over his shoulders, smoking a cigar. said, "What you doing standing here, son?" I said, "Oh, they've told me to operate the lift today." He goes, "Oh, right." He said, "Can you take me to the first floor?" So I get in the lift, press the button, and I notice there's only one floor. Keep my mouth shut. And he said, "What's your name, son?" I said, "Lloyd Johnson." The door's open, straight into an office, right? He said, "Come in, Lloyd." He said, "I'm Mr. G, Cecil G." And I didn't know what to say because he was a bit of a god to me, you know what I mean? I didn't recognise him because there weren't any photographs of him around. And he started chatting to me and he said, "You know you've been had, don't you? You know?" And I said, "Well, I thought so, yeah." I said, "But what am I going to do on my first day?" And he smiled and he said, "I think you'd be better off in the Charing Cross Road shop," because I was a bit modded up and all the rest of it. He said, "You like pop music and all that, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, well, that's where all the bands shop. You'll finish the week here and on Monday present yourself to Mr. Hirsch in Charing Cross Road," which is what I did. When I got to Charing Cross Road, I mean, we used to sit behind the tie bar and there was a little gap behind the tie bar at the bottom.
That's the place where they sell ties, right?
Yeah. That's where we used to have our tea break. You know, and somebody would be trying a tie on and things like that, and you could put your hand under the tie bar and pull their tie. We had a lot of fun there, and the customers there were John Lennon bought his suede jean jacket there.
And so, like, for you, fresh to London, you're working in Cecil G's, which was a sort of dream anyway, and then you move over to Charing Cross Road, and then you see people like John Lennon, right, coming in to buy a jacket. What did that feel like?
Very weird, but they were just normal people, and it happened every day. You know, we had Mick Jagger came in, Mike McVeigh, who was one of the window dressers, was just doing the window, and he had all these old Dr. Kildare shirts. You know, he managed to sell them to Dave Clark 5, right, and they all started wearing them. Then Mick Jagger came in looking for a shirt, and Mike McVeigh said, "How about a Dave Clark 5 shirt?" And Mick Jagger said, "How about a punch on the nose?" You know, I mean, it was a constant flow of people like the Kinks and St. Louis Union, and so it was a constant flow of bands, you know.
So you're also picking up on the sort of looks that are changing.
I couldn't help that because right from Hastings, I was the one at the front of the stage, completely cataloguing in my mind what the bands wore. You know, I could tell you what all the bands wore now.
So when you started working there and bands like that came in to get dressed, and you were cataloguing what the sort of changing styles were.
Yeah, but you're not aware of it. It just stays in your mind. Oh, so-and-so bought this, so-and-so bought that, you know. When I saw the Undertakers, which were a fabulous Liverpool band, in Hastings, they were wearing drape suits. They had Anello and David boots, but they were baby sealskin, you know, that low, very low fur. And I hadn't seen those before, you know. And they wore top hats with purple chiffon scarves round and things like that. Jackie Lomax was the singer, and he was just blinding, you know, just incredible.
And were you living the life a bit then, as well as working there? Were you sort of going to gigs?
I didn't like to go home, because once you've caught the tube home to Clapham South, best stay indoors, because it was pretty heavy then, you know, and sitting looking at four walls wasn't very inviting, especially, you know, the condition of the places that you live back then. So what I used to do, I used to finish work and I'd go to the Ship in Wardle Street, and that's where all the bands used to drink, you know, before they played the marquee. So I was just this quiet little guy that sat in the corner listening to people like Mark Bolan go on about playing in Germany and people ripping up the seats. And when he was in John's Children, they all used to wear white, you know.
So you're the quiet guy sitting in the corner listening to the stories, but also checking out what they're wearing,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Well, it was just my personality.
So then you started making your own stuff.
I got the sack one lunchtime from Cecil G's because the manager was picking on this old boy, And all this old guy used to do was run messages and make cups of tea for people, you know. And the manager sort of seemed to like to push him around and boss him around. I said to the manager, leave him alone. He said, what did you say? You know, it was one of those sort of things. I said, leave him alone. Then I called him something I shouldn't have called him. And he said, right, you've got the sack. I said, OK. So I put my coat on and just walked out. I must have bought a paper or something, or seen a notice in Regent Street. There was a job going in Austin Reed. So I just went straight in there, immediately was able to speak to Colin Woodhead that was running it. He said, OK. He said, why did you get the sack? And I told him. He gave me a job. And within a week, Colin Woodhead had put an easel in and had me drawing out clothes, which he said, you concentrate on that, and if there's anyone needs serving, the others can do it, right?
And you can draw, right?
Yeah. Not wonderfully well, but okay. And I can draw clothes. We had this girl that used to come in called Katja that made ties. And she's selling loads of ties to Q department. Ties out of Liberty prints, Madras, batik prints and things like that. And
quite flamboyant then.
Yeah, but sort of about probably 2 inches wide, you know, with a square end, because that was what was popular. And then kipper ties came in. So I thought we could do that, and then I made a couple for myself that I wore to work. My mate from Hastings was working in Tiles, which was a 24-hour mod club, running the Irving Sellers shop. I used to spend my lunchtime in there. He said to me, where'd you get your tie? And I said, I made it. He said, do you want to make some samples? So we went to Liberty's and bought half a yard of this, half a yard. He helped me make them. He showed them to Irving Sellers, and we got an order for 12 dozen ties. We made them, got paid for them. Within a week, he wanted another load, you know, and that's how it started, basically. And then we started making, you know, kipper ties. Ones with slash ends, ones with round ends, ones with insets with sequins round and all the rest of it. When we started selling to Q, Blades, which was a dandy Savile Row shop. And then we were selling to Washington and Tremlett, which was a posh shirt shop. Patrick said, who else do you want to sell to? And I said, well, I'd like to sell to Just Men, Hung on You, and Granny Takes a Trip.
These boutiques of the swinging 60s.
Yeah, they were the stylists, you know. And by then, Carnaby Street was copying Michael Rainey at Hung on You, John Pierce, the chaps at Just Men, you know.
So this is the rise of King's Road, and
that's when it was just coming up really big.
But this is quite a signal moment then, isn't it, for you? Because this is the time when you sort of stepped out from behind the counter, and you're actually making the designing stuff, your own stuff, right? And then also people are digging it and want to buy it.
Living in Clapham South, making those deliveries to the King's Road, coming up that escalator in the King's Road into the sunshine, and seeing all those beautiful girls in miniskirts when it was much more drab down in Clapham South. And I said to Patrick, I want to live over this side of town. So within another week, we had, I suppose you could call it chambers, because it was very Oscar Wilde. And we moved into a huge room in Harrington Gardens. By then we were getting dandified, right? And we thought we were the bee's knees, you know. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we went to Just Men one day, and the two guys that were running it, John Dacey and Ian Lockhead, said, we won't be here next time you come. We're going to open a shop within a shop, High Street, Kensington. I said, what do you mean? Because that concept wasn't around then, you know. One of them took us over there, and we went into this empty building, which was a department store previously, I guess. It was just bare floorboards, nothing in there. They said, we've got this bit, and they had a carpenter there building the walls and all the rest of it. Patrick said, how much is it to get a bit? And he said, well, that's Our bit is 20 quid, and it was quite big.
A week.
Yeah. So we went up to the office, and the guy in the office said, if you take this piece of chalk and mark out on the ground what you want, I'll come down and price it. So it was a bit like the gold rush, really, you know, even though there were no one in there. I mean, it was balmy. So we marked out a bit. We ended up paying something like £14 a week. Muggins here, I had to build the shop, and I built it like a submarine. If I chose a corner, so I only had to build 2 walls. I made it rounded. I made oval shape to get in, so you have to step over and in. So it was like a submarine,
right? Yeah.
And then I made a big plug to go in there with a bar that came down and padlocked each side. Painted it all silver, and put upholstery tacks, you know, the dome ones, so it looked like rivets all over it. So it was very Jules Verne, right? And then inside I got Art Nouveau wallpaper from John Oliver, green velvet curtains, and we got a big chest of drawers, Victorian chest of drawers, and 2 high back dining chairs, very innately carved each side. A friend of ours, Marcel Lassance, was a Minou, which is the equivalent of a mod in France, but a bit more classy. He said, come over to Paris and I'll introduce you to Newman jeans. So we started importing Newman jeans, and Ozzie Clark had just started, and we went over to see him, and we bought all his short Cafe Racer leather jackets, and we went to Westaway and bought saddle shoulder Shetland sweaters in fabulous colours. And when we were in France, we bought Burlington socks. So we had a complete French rock and roll look, basically. It was called the Heavy Metal Kids. Before it meant heavy rock and roll.
Yeah, so this was the Heavy Metal Kids was born, right?
Yeah. And Patrick got that from, I think, a John Steinbeck novel.
Just to pause there for a second, Lloyd, because that's a good time just to say a little bit about Ken Market, because this building that you'd actually was totally empty, became Kensington Market.
That's right.
Which ran all the way through to the
32 years.
32 years, and it ran all the way through to sort of 2000, didn't it? 2000. And I just thought, just to say a few things about Ken Market. You're talking about it earlier, and the sort of place that it occupies and maybe isn't really credited for in a way.
Absolutely. I think the press initially were snobbish about writing about it because there was a lot of dross in there, like loom pants and Star long sleeve T-shirts, Grandad 3-button T-shirts and all that. But people like Peppy Jeans and Sterling Cooper, Pamela Motown, who became the big designer with Mr. Freedom along with her boyfriend Jim O'Connor. Anthony Price became big doing the clothes for Roxy Music, having his own label. Sheila Brown, who was a designer for Sterling Cooper, became the head of Marks and Spencer's women's wear. A lot of talent come out there, and of course there was Ken Corder, who had a place called Ruskin's. He now owns Aero Leathers, which make probably the best leather jackets around.
It was like an incubator. Stylists and fashion dressers and clothes makers and stylists, right?
Yeah. We were all winging it. We were all learning to cut patterns on the wing.
To explain what it was like, because I came right at the end when I came to London, and it was in the 90s, it was at the end, but it was this mecca, really. You went in this building, it was on 2 floors, and it was this, there was stalls basically, or shops within this big shop, and it was this feast of stylish stuff. And I'm going to tell you a story. We're jumping ahead obviously because Johnson's had a shop in there, and I went into the shop, right, and I was trying something on in the changing room. I was listening to the music that was playing, right, and it was just right at the beginning for me of being a musician, and I didn't really know what an album was, But there was this music playing. I thought, what's this? It was amazing. And I stayed for ages in the changing room, so much so that the guy who was actually behind the counter came round. I thought maybe thought I was shooting up or something. You know what I mean?
Nicking something.
So what are you doing in there? I said, I'm just really digging this music. What is it? And it was an album called Oedipus Schmiedipus by Barry Adamson, right? You know, and it sort of introduced me to the idea of what an album could be like a sort of concept album, you know what I mean? And as a consequence of that,
he was in
Bad Seeds magazine, Birthday Party, Nick Cave. I mean, it turned me on to like what an album could be and the kind of music, and that sort of really got me going. But it was just that, for me, it wasn't just the clothes; it was the vibe somehow in Johnson.
Well, he came in and he gave us all these CDs that he'd made. They're all handwritten on. There was one, something about Moss Side
Story.
Yeah, and he made them all for us and brought them in. They're incredible, and we became good friends with him. And one year he did a meltdown. We were talking, and I said, you've got to do a main title theme that Jet Harris, the theme to The Man with the Golden Arm. He invited us along to the meltdown, and he introduced Man with a Golden Arm. I'm playing this for a friend. You know, when tears come to your eyes, and you it's one of those, I can't believe this is happening moments. And fortunately, I've had a lot of those, you know, and in my life happened, you know.
For you, so Johnson's wasn't just a clothes store, was it? It was sort of
just a way of life.
It was a way of life.
It was my life. I mean, sometimes I may have, through financial pressures, skidded off the lines a bit and lost track. You know, everybody does. But I mean, always wanted to do things because I'd like them, not necessarily because they sold, you know. But I was always trying to come up with something new. And that's a lot of pressure all the time, you know.
You got heavy metal kids, right? And again, I mean, quite quickly, people started to come and buy. Young people, it's a youth culture, wasn't it? But also, like, quite quickly became sort of well known with sort of musicians.
Yeah, and people behind the scenes in the music business. Some of the first people I had were the Roulettes, which was Adam Faith's backing band. So that was great for me, you know.
People who've been your heroes.
And Unit 4+2, you know, and they were bands that really were from the early 60s, you know, and they had to jig themselves around to lose the name and sort of come up again.
Metamorphosise into something a bit more psychedelic, right?
Yeah. So that was it. That was an interesting
And
period.
how would you describe the style at that time, your style? I mean, as in what you guys were doing? Call that dandy peacock look.
Because we came from doing Newman jeans and the short cafe racer jackets, like the sort of thing Michel Polnareff used to wear, you know. It was like a French pop style. Then we discovered these shirts which were called ligne de corps, which is line of the body, or skin shirt basically. Shirts with 3 darts high waist at the back, right, each side, and then another dart coming from under the arm each side at the front, with 1-inch high collars and a spear point collar. And we started making those. That was a period where it had gone from 3-button suit, waisted with high vents, towards 2-button fitted suits and very, very French looking. And we were doing that. And then we were doing very slim riding macs. We were doing them in 6 colours in double texture fabric. They had straps around the legs inside and all that. But we were doing all these printed shirts. Then it morphed into pop art shirts, and then we found fabrics with magic mushrooms on and clouds, and you know, so it went in all through that. And we did the beagle collar, all sorts of nonsense, you know.
I like what you said about, you know, what you were creating, what you saw as stage wear, but to be worn on the street.
Yeah, well, that's what it was.
Right.
You know?
And then that started to attract that kind of rock and roll audience, didn't it, really?
Yeah. I never went the platform boot way.
It sort of evolved, didn't it, from heavy metal kids into
Cochran and Johnson.
Yeah.
And we put established 1966. So mentally, people used to look at it and think it was 1866. You know?
And what sort of stuff were you doing then?
We were doing our own corduroy and velvet things, and I was doing French style velvet jackets in loads of colours with concave shoulders, a bit like what you've got on, and narrow shoulders. And Charlie Chaplin suit I did, like a short boxy jacket with Oxford bags. I was also selling shoes at that time from Daisy Roots, which were very colourful, and Rod Stewart used to buy those from us. Ronnie Wood was a friend back then because Chrissy Wood worked on Big O Posters, which was, I think it was run by...
Harvey Goldsmith?
Yeah, Harvey Goldsmith. He was always in the market. I was good friends with Chrissy, and we'd all hang out. I mean, especially early 70s in Bieber's Rainbow Room. It just slowly changed all the time, you know. I'd never really noticed it, you know. You just
kept working.
Yeah, you just instinctively cut a new collar shape or a new body fit, or, you know. Just
to talk a little bit about the sort of place of all that stuff. So this was a time when, I suppose, in the sort of 60s and late 60s and early 70s, where certainly men's fashion was becoming a lot more sort of flamboyant, wasn't it? And the mix-up of all that stuff then, Lloyd, you know, youth culture and counterculture and pop culture and streetwear. And in London, Kensington and Chelsea, it was quite a time, right?
You know, sometimes people accidentally get something wrong and it looks brilliant. I mean, an example of that in my mind is Brian Jones when he went through the sort of overdressing period, you know. And because of his facial features and his hair, it just it overrides any mistakes he might make putting things together.
Were you living the life a bit, or were you just working the whole time?
We've been very naughty.
Right, tell me, come on.
Not too many drugs, because I'd seen a couple of people drop off the edge of the world, you know, and a couple of suicides as well. I was drinking too much. Every Saturday night you go home with a different girl, you know. And you wake up in the morning and think, who is this? What's her name?
Living in Chelsea.
No, so it was great.
Whilst you were at Kent Market, that's where you met Queen, and didn't they have a stall there for a while?
Freddie worked for Alan Mayer. Alan Mayer was the bass player for the Beat Stalkers, and he became the bass player for The Only Ones, and Peter Perrett was the singer. They had Another Girl, Another Planet, big hit. Freddie was in a band called Smile. We sort of knew one of them was going to break, you know. Freddie was just another guy that worked in the market. Really nice guy, very, very polite. Not how he's portrayed as over-the-top outrageous. He wasn't he wasn't like that then, you know. He used to go to the gay clubs with Peter Rogers, who worked for me. And Mary used to come in from Bieber's, and you know, if he hadn't gone home that night or something, do you know where Freddie is? And Peter would just say, well, I left early. They used to go to heaven, you know, behind Charing Cross. It was obviously, you know, he was gay because he'd go to gay clubs with a gay guy, you know. But Peter and him weren't having a scene, you know.
Mary wasn't quite sure what was going on at that time.
No, it's sad, really.
The market itself, and it was this kind of cultural crossroads as well, wasn't it, in a way?
Yeah, there was always musicians there.
You know, working there, doing the thing until they could get their musical career off the ground.
And Ronnie Wood backed Colin Bennett, who was my flatmate back then. Colin made a few jackets for us, and Rod Stewart wore one on Gasoline Alley on the centrefold, and Colin used to make stage wear for him. All of a sudden, Ronnie came in and said, I'm going on tour with the Stones. And it's funny then, because the portcullis came down. We didn't really see each other again until he started buying stuff from the King's Road shop again, you know.
Right. Well, so we're going to move on to that in a second. But, you know, more and more people started famous people started wearing your stuff, didn't they? And then there's been, you know, many, many down the years, right? So you were doing you're becoming more successful. You opened a boutique on King's Road.
Yeah. My first wife and I split up, so I stopped calling it Johnson's, and I called it Johnson's. In the market. And then when we opened the one in the King's Road, I called it Johnson's the Modern Outfitters because in the 60s all the more fashionable shops had things like clothes for the modern man, or you know, Harry's modern menswear and all that stuff, you know. And I thought, well, I want something a little bit sophisticated, more sophisticated than that, so I called it the Modern Outfitters. which really took off, you know.
Just before we go on to boutique, 70s London's changing, the UK's changing, recessions come, and it's quite interesting. We're recording this at the moment now, when it sort of might be going into a similar sort of era.
Yeah.
And for a while, you came out of sort of designing stuff, didn't you?
Also, the hair came off. All of a sudden, I had what I call a mummy's boy haircut, you know, like a fop, you know, like a parting, hair over one eye, short round the back and sides, that sort of thing. I started selling second-hand, which is now called vintage, dead stock, you know, menswear from the 30s, 40s, 50s, a little bit from the 60s. And that was because of the miners' strike. It became the 3-day week, so electricity was on ration. You could only run your factory for 3 days a week. Big companies got the priority. Getting anything made was impossible on the scale that I was operating on. This was 73, something like that. So I started doing second-hand and all that. I papered one wall with brick wallpaper because I like kitsch, and then all the rest of the walls I papered with 50s and 60s newspapers. So I got Weapon Amnesty, you know, with the flick knives and knuckle dusters and maces and God knows what pictured in the centre page. Another, you know, newspaper overreaction, plus all the mods and Rocka riots and stuff like that. You know, on the back of aquariums you get all this pictures of fish and underwater plants. So I did that all along where I put the displays of the shirts, what I could make out of nothing. I go down to Brick Lane, 3 o'clock in the morning when it was dark with a tool, pick up things like 1940s sandals, and then I discovered somebody that could get plastic sandals, and then there was a guy that was making peg trousers because Let It Rock had just started.
The Westwood and McLaren shop, yeah.
So I was buying pink and blue pegs from him. I got my sister to make me mohair sweaters, which was basically the soul boy look. You know, all you needed then was a wedge haircut and one blonde streak down one side, you know. So they all started coming, and then I found these two Jewish guys in Leyden Street, near where they used to slaughter the chickens. They were importing American stuff, so I could get all college jackets and bowling shirts and all that sort of thing. And they also had a deal with the Demon.
It's ex-army stuff,
yeah,
basically.
Yeah. So they've never been unpacked since the 40s, you know, since the end of the war. So I used to buy single-breasted and double-breasted from them. The whole Glenn Miller thing kicked off in Canvey Island with the Gold Mine Club. Chris Hill was DJing. All the kids started coming to me buying them. I'm trying to think the name of the band. He was a postman, I think.
Subway Sect.
Yeah.
Vic Goddard.
Yeah. Vic Goddard. I used to look upon them all as the little kids, you know, because I was 30 by then, you know, and they were 17, you know.
So they're all coming out of punk, right? And post-punk, right?
Yeah. So they started buying all the 40s stuff, you know. And then I was getting Susie and Billy Idol and Steve Severon, all those people. Nils, who was a mate of mine, Nils Stevenson was Malcolm's right-hand man. He used to bring all the flyers over for the Sex Pistols, you know. And I'm saying to him, well, what's all this about? You know, he goes, I said, it's a band Malcolm's putting together, he's promoting, you know. And I used to put all the flyers in every single bag, you know, because like when you didn't have anything to do, you know. So everyone that bought something from me got a Sex Pistols flyer for El Paradiso, and now I look at the prices those things are going for. I think, shit, I had piles of those every week, you know. Incredible, isn't it? I did say to Niels, you ought to try and register this blackmail lettering.
Cut out newspaper lettering.
Yeah. But he couldn't do it because each font was registered, you know, each single letter was registered.
So you're still like dressing the musicians and the...
Because they hadn't become who they became. They're just basically normal people, aren't they? You know, I was never fazed by any of that. The only time I got starstruck and tongue-tied, apart from Johnny Walker, was when Charlie Watts came in. Charlie Watts and Tony Meehan were my two clothing gods, you know.
Charlie Watts, a very well-dressed man, right?
Yeah.
So, and then 1979, you launch La Rocka.
That's right, yeah. That was because we were getting so much publicity as a mod shop, because we did the clothes for Phil Daniels and Sting in Quadrophenia, and somehow it leaked out, you know, through the grapevine. All the newspapers and all the magazines were going, if you want the mod look, go to Johnson's. And I just thought, this is a blind alley, you know, this is all going to be over. And people go, oh, don't go there, it's a mod shop, you know.
Yeah, and also it was second time round for you, wasn't
it? Yeah. What I did was caricature versions of things, you know. I'd sort of do something like a 3-button leather blazer, like Ivy League style blazer, but I'd do it in white, yellow, blue, red, you know, colours that should never be made. But the white one, Anthony Perkins bought the white one, and my wife was serving him, and I just said to her, don't go near the shower. And she said, what do you mean? I said, you'll find out. And she asked me later, I said, that was Anthony Perkins from Psycho. You know. So we had a lot of people like that, like Jack Nicholson used to come in, Dustin Hoffman.
So Jack Nicholson started to wear La Rocka?
He wore all the 50s suits and things like that. And one day he was trying on shoes in the basement. We had a very old barber's chair, and we fixed fiberglass skulls on it. So the chair became known as the Sweeney Todd chair. Scruffy, who was one of the girls that worked for me, Bish Nethercott, was her dog, used to like sleeping on the chair. And Jack Nicholson came in to buy some shoes, and he wanted to sit down to try the shoes on, and he went to usher Scruffy off, and Scruffy bit him. Right? And I'm thinking, it was another one like those Fred Astaire time. I'm thinking, oh no, that's the end of the shop. You know?
Get sued by Jack Nicholson for getting a dog bite.
We said, are you all right? Are you all right? He said, don't worry, it was my fault. Really nice bloke, you know. He bought the shoes, and he always used to come every morning. Every morning after that, he'd come with bones for Scruffy. You know, he used to bring Scruffy leftover food from his meal the night before.
And lots of people came to me to shop, but I wanted to mention one in particular to you because I did an interview with Johnny Marr, and Johnny Marr is very fond of you because you know, he loves clothes. You know, and he was up in Manchester, and this is pre-Smiths. He was working in
Aladdin's Cave,
and he had this sort of, said he had a boss who was a bit of a chancellor. He used to send Johnny and with Angie down to London, to King's Road, to sort of basically nick ideas. And
they were babies. You know, they looked to me as if they were about 16, 17. You know, and they were friends with good friends with Billy Duffy.
Right? So Johnny said that he came down and. They had on this mission to sort of basically nick your ideas or nick your stuff to take back so that they could rip them off up in Aladdin's Cave. But he said he got really fed up with it because he liked you and he liked the clothes, and so they used to get nice stuff or cool stuff for themselves. And then they used to give the guy in Aladdin's Cave the sort of dead stock. And he said that when they got back they get the train back to Manchester, and before they went into scene, they'd separate out the stuff they wanted to hide it, and go and give him the stuff that they didn't really like. And then he'd say, is Lloyd Johnson really doing this stuff? And it's like, oh yeah. For him, coming to your shop was part of the whole London thing, I suppose. But it was actually like they were super excited. Do you remember him coming in?
Yeah, I do. I used to take the mickey out of them, actually, because they were so banging love, you know. And it's very sweet. I love seeing people that love each other, you know. And I used to say, oh, look at the two little lovebirds, and they go red, you know. It's funny, you know.
Billy Duffy, later of the Cult, he worked for you. What was he like?
Billy was fine. He was a little bit lazy. I got angry one day because he was working down the warehouse for 1 week, filling in. And I came into the warehouse and he was laying on one of the packing tables, you know. And I said to him, We need to do a coat hanger count because I've got a load of suits coming in. So I had him counting coat hangers. You know. Everyone that worked for us was great looking and good models for the clothes, and they all used to go to the clubs. So we used to, every time we did something new, we used to let them all choose an outfit, head to toe outfit. So that was great publicity.
George Michael wearing a Johnson's BSA Rocker's Revenge leather jacket.
Yeah. That is probably the best known piece of stuff from Johnson. I saw biker jackets with Russian artworks on the back and found out that they were from a guy called Russell Tate. And I drove up to see him and asked him to do some artworks for me. BSA one, there was about 5 of them, you know. But the BSA one took off. That was selling really well. And then George Michael, he bought about 10 of them, I think, you know.
That was his stage wear on that tour, right?
Yeah. And the boots with the toe and heel.
There's been many other down the years, because you also had a shop on Portobello Road, you had a shop on Notting Hill and King's Road. But I mean, all the other people, I mentioned some of them earlier on, you know, Madness, Iggy Pop, Tom Waits, Fun Loving Criminals.
Bob Dylan.
What did Bob Dylan wear then?
He bought a white fringed biker jacket for the Albert Hall gig. But the funny story there is Antoine Mills that worked for me. He was working in the shop in the King's Road when Bob Dylan came in, but didn't see Bob Dylan come in, just saw all these gorillas surrounding this little bloke. And we used to get quite a bit of shoplifting, so he thought it was a bunch of shoplifters. And all this stuff was being thrown, you know, there were all these big guys surrounding this person, and all this stuff was being thrown up and all over the place on one of the tables in the shop. And Anton went up and said, "You're going to buy some of that or what?" And then the little person from the middle of these sheepishly said, "Yes, I am," you know. And it was a Bob Dylan.
So down the years, you know, really from that sort of early Ken Market to when you ended around about 2000, I mean, where were you getting stuff made?
Down in the East End, early on in Manchester. When I was 22, we had our own shirt factory in Rye Hill, outside of Wakefield. We found a disused supermarket, you know.
So you got stuff made all over the place, basically.
Yeah.
Always in the UK?
Always in the UK until the 90s, where we were getting stuff made in Indonesia.
We haven't mentioned some of the other stuff that you did, the New Romantics, and also the easy listening thing, right?
The easy listening stuff, yeah. All the 70s big collars, satin shirts, and square-toed fake Gucci shoes, massive collars and lapels, sort of dandy coats, and the full-length pink fur coats and things like that. Oasis bought the coats, but not in pink. But the long pink ones, all the bouncers from Ministry of Sounds bought them. And they were mainly black guys, and they dyed all their hair blonde. So there was a definite look. And one of them said to me, "How's it going?" I said, "Well, it's not going great at the moment." He said, "Oh, we won't let anyone in unless they're wearing the Rocka." So the cheapest thing to buy was T-shirts, right? And the T-shirt sales went through the roof. You know, I mean, I can't believe it. You know, touch wood, it still carries on in my life. But everybody is on your side. You know, it just seemed like that. You know.
Yeah, that's a lot to do with you, I think, Lloyd, though. Just to wheel on towards the end, Ken Market closed around about 1999, 2000, didn't they?
It was 2000, and it dripped on until about March in 2000.
And that was a real loss, wasn't it? I mean, as ever, you know, cities change, things get developed. You know, that Kensington High Street where Kensington Market was, it always seemed, or started to seem like an anachronism, because that part of London became more and more kind of just about money in a way, didn't it? And, you know, a sort of a bohemian street culture, youth culture, counterculture, pop culture like that. It was lost, right?
Yeah, well, it's all moved down to Shoreditch, and pretty soon you'll have skyscrapers and God knows what going up down there.
Yeah, it always moves on, isn't it? But Ken Market was a loss, wasn't it? Really, because it wasn't just for the clothes, but it was this kind of melting pot and as we were saying earlier, like an incubation place.
You know, so you had people coming out of the Royal College and the London School of Fashion, and even people that just wanted to have a go. You know, it gives people a chance to do it, and it's something that you can't do that in an artificial way.
I think also it was a place where people bumped into each other. You know, bands got formed, didn't they?
Yeah.
And it was like this crossroads for stuff happening as well. So you know, and that's kind of invaluable, isn't it? For you, sort of around about 2000, you decided to pull out of that kind of retail stuff, didn't you? And
what was happening is the rents were going so high, I could see everything shifting to Shoreditch. I lived in West London, I lived in Putney. There's no way I was going to get on a tube train and go to Shoreditch every day. Acid jazz, when all that come in, and hip hop and all the rest of it, I couldn't relate to that at all. You know, I mean, I'm a guitar band minded person. I like kitsch and all that sort of thing. Cramps and...
You'd done your time. You'd dressed a lot of people. You created a lot of looks.
Yeah.
The Jim Jarmusch films. I mean, I love those films, right?
Yeah.
You know, Down by Law, Mystery Train. You've got clothes in them, right?
Yeah.
I did hear, just from a little bird, that you've got a hobby making flying machines.
Yeah, model aeroplanes, right?
Which fly though, right?
Yeah. But they're all pre-1950s, real boys' own stuff, you know. And I've also been hooked on collecting tin plate toys now. So I collect clockwork tin plate toys.
Is your house super stylish?
Well, the last one you would have liked. The whole garden was Hawaiian. I had a 1961 coffee bar in the basement. It almost looks like a strip club, you know, like I had a jukebox with no records after 1961. Kitsch version of Americana, you know. Loads of instrumental bands like the Cougars, the Hunters and people like that, you know.
Lloyd Johnson, thanks very much to come into the Bureau of Lost Culture.
My pleasure. Okay.
Thanks so much to Lloyd. What a terrific fella, what a terrific storyteller, and so stylish. I've got to get myself some new clobber. Lloyd's put together an amazing soundtrack of his favourite tracks. It came from the show that he did back in Chelsea in 2012 with Paul Gorman. It's a wonderful, rip-roaring selection of his favourite tunes. Join our mailing list and you can get it too. Leave us a review wherever you listen to this, alright? And you can tell your mates and join us at bureauoflostculture.com. We're going to play out with a track by the band The Real Tuesday World. It's called Too Much Too Soon from their album Blood.